Welcome to the Exploring Unschooling podcast. I'm Pam Sorooshian, unschooling mom and author, bringing you interviews, information, and inspiration about unschooling and living joyfully with your family. You can find the episode show notes, your free Exploring Unschooling ebook, and lots more information at livingjoyfully.ca. And here's the show. Hello everyone, I'm Pam Sorooshian, and this is episode number 2 of the podcast. It's the 12th of January as I record this intro. In this episode, I ask Pam Sorooshian, a veteran unschooling mom, 10 questions about unschooling. In these 10 questions episodes, my plan is to dive deeper into their unschooling experience, getting their perspectives and insights on different aspects of unschooling. I hope you'll find these episodes helpful, finding connections to your own unschooling lives, and even some tips you can put into practice right away. Before we get started, a quick update on life around here. About a half an hour ago, we were notified that Lissy's U.S. visa application was approved. Yay! If you listened to the last episode, you know that my daughter Lissy has been living and working in New York City on a U.S. visa since she was 18. It's now been 3 years, the maximum length for an O1 visa, so she applied again last month. She came home for the holidays and has stayed to await the results. It'll take a few days for the paperwork to arrive so that she can cross the border, but we've got stuff to keep busy. So that's the big news of the week around here. Okay, on to this week's quote, which is from Wendell Holmes Jr. Man's mind, once stretched by a new idea, never regains its original dimensions. So true, isn't it? And that's what I'm hoping to do with this podcast, stretch some minds. That doesn't necessarily mean changing them. I remember when I first came across some unschooling-related ideas, and they were too foreign for me to consider implementing at the time. But my mind was stretched. I couldn't unhear those ideas. As I learned more and more, eventually those ideas came to make more and more sense, and I gradually incorporated them. I'm having the same experience right now on my writing journey. I think it's a feature of learning. Stretch and grow into it. Stretch and grow into it over time. If you have any thoughts you'd like to add, just head on over to livingjoyfully.ca/podcast and share in the comments for episode 2. And now, let's go to the interview with Pam Sorooshian. Hi everyone, I'm Pam Sorooshian from livingjoyfully.ca, and today I'm here with Pam Sorooshian. Hi Pam.
Hello.
It's great to have you on the show. Pam is a longtime unschooling mom of 3 girls who are now adults. And lucky for us, she's continued to stay actively involved in the unschooling community. She's also a professor of economics and statistics. And I have 10 questions for you today, Pam, so let's dive in.
Okay.
All right, first question. Jumping back just a few years, how did you first hear about unschooling, and what spurred you to begin exploring unschooling with your family?
Well, it was a few years. My oldest daughter is 31, and my middle daughter is 28, and my youngest will be 25 in a couple of weeks.
Wow.
So, yes, it's been a while. My older 2 were in a school. We had searched around, changed schools, tried to find a school that I was happy with, and had succeeded the best we could, but not entirely. I was looking for sort of like holistic schooling, not worksheets and things like that, like just a more open type school. And we finally ended up in a public school that didn't have any grades or assignments or homework or tests. And it was really quite lovely. And I think it was the very, very best we possibly could have found. And yet I was pretty unhappy with it. And I was constantly complaining to one of my sisters about the school, and I didn't like how they did this, and I didn't like that. And she looked at me one day and said, it's never going to be the way you want it. And I said, you're right. Like, it's impossible. It's never going to be what I'm looking for. And at the same time, my older daughter was 9 and was doing very, very well. Everybody loved her. She was doing great in school. There was no problems or anything. But I had started to notice at that age that her unbridled enthusiasm for learning and stuff was kind of starting to be dulled. And my younger daughter, who was in an open classroom, no grade levels, no grades, anything like that, was just frustrated and bored out of her mind. She was highly talented in reading and writing, and was being way too limited in the school, the classroom. There wasn't enough for her to do, and she was just bored and unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
And that was according even to her teacher. The teacher was telling me, well, there's not enough here that we can offer her.
Yep.
So they got chicken pox, and it was in the spring, and all three of the kids got chicken pox, and they were out of school, but they weren't very sick. And we had a fabulous time. And it was April, and as the time came for them to be well enough to go back to school, because of budget cuts, our schools no longer have school nurses. We have school health clerks, and I would take the kids into the school and show her that they still had little pox on them. And I'd say, I don't think they really should come in. They might still be contagious. And the health clerk would say, oh, well, okay, keep them home. And so 4 weeks went by, 5 weeks went by, 6 weeks went by. Pretty soon, we were towards the end of May by that time, and they hadn't gone back to school because we were just having too much fun. And pretty soon there was 1 week of school left, and my older daughter wanted to go back for that 1 week to finish up the school year and do all her fun things. And so she did. But in the meantime, I was online thinking, how can we just keep this going? This is so much better. So I got online. America Online had just started up. And so I got on America Online, and I found homeschoolers. And lo and behold, there was a little one-day unschooling conference being held almost in my neighborhood that week.
Wow.
So the kids went to school that week, and I went to a conference, and then school was over, and then they never went back. And my oldest daughter, Roya, wanted to go back, but I offered her the option to try it for 6 weeks and then decide. And at the end of about a week or two, she had said, oh, no way do I ever want to go back. This is so much better. And we discovered a support group that was super fun, and the kids were putting on plays and having a blast, and we were going to the beach. We live in Southern California. We were going to the beach every day, and we went to just all kinds of fun things. So in the meantime, I was on AOL talking to all the homeschoolers that I found on there. Those days, this was before in the United States, the religious right got really into homeschooling. And it was just when they were just getting started, and there were a lot of unschoolers. Homeschooling was unschooling then. Like, people didn't use two different words for it. People at that time were John Holt followers, and he had recently passed away, but he had spoken here in my area, and lots of people I knew had seen him speak. And that was the whole atmosphere of homeschooling, was that if you're not fully unschooling already, then you're just on your way there. So I was pretty immersed in an unschooling world almost from the very first day. And it resonated with me completely. It was exactly what I'd been thinking about. It hadn't occurred to me that the kids didn't have to go to school. So
that was exactly my situation too.
So we did. We just didn't go to school anymore, and we just pretty much dropped any kind of schooling right from the get-go, and had a blast and never looked back. They never wanted to go to school, and my youngest daughter never went at all. And every year I'd ask her, do you want to go to school this year? Because you might want that experience just a little bit, just want to see what it's like. And she would say, no, I don't want to. I'm fine. I talk to all my friends I know. They all go to school. I have no interest in it. And she had a lot of friends who went to school, and she just never wanted to. And in the year that it would have been her senior year in high school, I said, this is your last chance. You will never get a chance to do this social thing that society thinks is critical and essential for every kid. You'll never get a chance to do it. You'll never get that chance again. And she was like, I just don't need it. I don't want it. Stop trying to talk me into it. I wasn't really perfectly happy for her not to do it, but I wanted to make sure she knew that it was her choice.
That it was an option, yeah.
Or that she had made the choice that I didn't want later for her to say, I never even got any experience of it.
Yeah.
Because the other kids had it, and they knew what it was like,
That leads nicely into our next question. when they're not having the school experience, I wanted to talk a little bit about what learning looks like with unschooling. So when any of your children were actively pursuing an interest, what are some of the things that you did to help support that exploration? And with three of them, how did you weave together pursuing all their interests?
Well, their interests looked like play, and they mostly played.
Mm-hmm.
And they were interested in, for example, dressing up their stuffed animals. So
Yeah.
I would buy fabric remnants or find old clothes that they could cut up and give them scissors and needles and thread and tape and fabric paint and let them go at it. And my job was to provide materials, transportation, and some cleanup time so that they would have more room to do it. So a lot of time when they were younger was spent with just a ton of pretend play, acting out with either stuffed animals, or we had a big doll house they played with a lot, or other kinds of dolls, or or just pretend play. They played Star Trek a lot, where they made all kinds of little props to go with it out of just cardboard and tape, and that was an ongoing game that they played for forever. And
Yep.
then they they liked to watch TV, and they had a lot of shows that they were really into. And so back in those days, we had VHS tapes, and it was my job to remember to record them. So there was a task for me, and to help them find them. It wasn't as easy as it is now, and
Mhm.
and to make sure that they didn't miss episodes of the shows they were really into. Ironically, one of them was Arthur, in which he goes to school, and there's a lot of school stuff involved in that.
Yep. Arthur and I have tapes full of Bill Nye the Science
They
Guy.
loved it, and the science guy, and where in the world is Carmen San Diego. They played on the
Yeah.
computer. We had one computer, so that was an issue to take turns, and they played a lot of games. Um, there they tried to share. They played together. They played like Oregon Trail, and then they kind of integrated the computer game into pretend play at the same time. So sometimes they'd play Oregon Trail, but then they'd be kind of like acting out, playing pretend, the same stuff that one of them would be on the computer playing it, telling them what was happening. And they dressed up a lot. They didn't do a lot of classes or anything like that at that stage. They did when they were older. They did, like, especially my oldest daughter liked to sign up for a lot of things. And we live in the Los Angeles area. We have a ton of museums and events and festivals and things like that. But really, what I remember looking back on those days is them playing music and dancing and singing a lot, and going to the beach and spending many, many, many long, long, long hours playing in the park, or swimming we have a swimming pool. They would swim in the swimming pool sometimes 8 or 9 or 10 hours, at a stretch. I would
Mhm.
bring them food and put it on the side of the pool so they could come up to the edge of the pool and grab something to eat. So much for that idea that you're not supposed to swim after eating, because they were swimming while
Yeah.
um, they were eating and swimming at the same time. We had a dog. They'd play with the dog. It was a lot like probably what a typical weekend might look like for kids in school, except we just did it all week long. And the difference on the weekends and the evenings is that my husband was home, and then he played with them. They did play some sports. They played soccer, so they were on soccer teams. Um, but otherwise, there wasn't anything particularly planned or anything like that. It was more a matter of like just the flow of every day. We cooked, we ate,
Yeah.
we went here and there, we visited friends came over. We were busy, and the days went by really fast.
Well, and I find that is one of looking back. Those are the times you remember, because that is one of the really wonderful things about unschooling is the time that we all actually get to spend together. And that in turn really strengthens our family's connections and relationships,
Oh, yeah.
which was something that I wasn't really expecting, because when I first was looking at unschooling, it was to replace school. So, the focus was on the learning, but soon enough, what the beauty really came to be was the connections and the relationships. So I thought I would ask, just because I know this question comes up quite a bit, especially when there's siblings, it's helping them figure out ways to move through moments when things get more challenging, when somebody's angry, somebody's frustrated with the game or with each other. Do you have some tips or remember some of the ways that you helped them move through conflicts when they were younger?
I don't know that I did the best job of that.
I know, we all just do what we can.
I can tell you, looking back now, how I think I could have done better, and that is, to just pay attention really closely and head things off when you see frustrations starting at the very, very beginning. Try to offer more, because frustration often comes from a scarcity of some kind of resource. Both of them want the same stuffed animal, or both of them want the same piece of fabric, or they both want to play the piano, or one wants to play the piano while the other one wants to watch TV right next to it. Or, a lot of times conflicts arise from that kind of wanting something that conflicts with what somebody else wants. And so trying to offer more right away before they dig in their heels and they're already engaged in some sort of standoff. So if you see a kid eyeing the piano and another kid's watching TV, before they open the piano and start playing it and start having a fight over who's going to get to, have that space, head that off really fast. And that requires paying really close attention. And being pretty in tune with your own kids so that you sense what's going on before it really sort of breaks out. And so that's the biggest thing to do. And then the other one is sometimes as they get older, to stay out of it, especially not with little kids, but with much older kids, is to let them use the skills they've developed and figure out how to work it out, while you're kind of paying attention and, making sure they are. I got too involved. I think as they got older, I stayed too involved, and I think they would have been better off if I let them work things out a little bit more. But then, you never know who's listening. I don't know who's listening. Some people they stay out of it too much, and they just have this attitude of, let the kids work it out, and they need the advice to get involved a little more and a little earlier. And other people are too involved. And, for me, it was a changing process over all those years. And my three daughters are still extremely close. They are definitely each other's best friends, and hang around together almost every single day. They talk to each other constantly, and they still fight. And I now, at this point, need to stay out of it entirely because they're all grown-ups and I don't need to be around at all. But it's still kind of hard for me. I still kind of want to get in there and solve the problems for them. But I think when you have that intense of relationships and you're together that much, that some level of conflict is really inevitable. And when they were going through different stages where one kid would be harder to get along with, or two kids just were like, having trouble with each other, my solution to that is to give them more space, not to try to force it, but to give them more space from each other. Have one visiting friends much more often, let them do overnighters somewhere else, and give the kid who's having problems with them a little more, opportunity to get over it and relax. And also having friends over helps to change the dynamics. A lot of times they'd get caught up in some kind of conflict and then they'd kind of make up, but then that same conflict would just keep rearing its head. And having friends come over and change all the dynamics of how everybody's interacting would sometimes kind of break that cycle, and then they'd be better off. And another thing is take one of the kids with you and go somewhere. Separate them in a happy way, not separate them because you guys can't get along, so you have to be separated. But, take one of the kids and, we can't do this. We couldn't do this in those days, but these days you can say, let's go to the grocery store, but stop at Starbucks or something and make it a fun trip. Those days it was like stop and get an ice cream cone or something like that. So that the kids could have breathing space from each other. And having more space even in your house helps a lot, I think, because if they have their own space they can retreat to that really just is theirs, and that the other kids can't go in and just interrupt them, I think that can really, really help. I I have two pretty outgoing, extroverted kids and one very introverted. And for her to have her own space was really critical in everybody getting along because she needed downtime way more than the other two did. So she needed to be able to get in there and, relax and just be on her own sometimes for hours.
Yeah, I found that to be a really important thing here as well. I think we've got 2 out of 3 that are quite introverted, and just to be able to say, this is enough, not even out loud, but just to realize for themselves, this is kind of enough, and have a place that they can go to recoup themselves. The other thing I wanted to point out, because I thought what you were sharing was great, I found the same thing when you don't know how much support they might need, and it's different for each child too. Sometimes they want lots of your support, sometimes they prefer you to back off. For me, what helped the most really was just looking to them to see what their reactions were.
Yep.
Like you said, some people may be needing one kind of advice and somebody else the opposite. It boils down to, looking at your own child and yourself and figuring out what is working in the moment best for them and paying attention, because that changes over time too, doesn't it?
Yeah, oh, it changes a lot. And also, like, don't keep doing something that's not working.
Working, yeah.
Don't think that just, you're not doing enough and doing more. Try something completely different and, try the opposite, for example, and see if that helps a little bit, and if that helps a little bit, then do more of that. But if something's not working well, so for example, there was a time period where I just aggravated all their conflicts. If as soon as
Hmm.
and they would tell me that even, they
Yeah.
would say like, "Mom, stay out of it." So two things there. Yes, take their word for it, and
Yeah.
if it's not working, stop doing it and figure out some other alternative. And also, I guess the other one is to not think too much in terms of black and white. Like there, it's not one thing or the other. It's try a little bit and see how it works, and then try something else. But make small changes are okay. Just make a little change to how your reactions are. And just make a little change to anything and watch them and see how that works, see if that leads to, you know, anything slightly better. And then the other thing is, like, don't get upset. I think the thing I did the worst at was it upset me when they were having conflict with each other and that I was upset by it instead of just being accepting. And it's a matter of fact that when you have 3 kids growing up together that they're going to have conflicts. I wasn't that accepting of it. I had some kind of an ideal in my head that they would all get along all the time. And so
Mhm.
I got my own emotions, got connected to that, got attached to the idea. And that's just
Yep.
not realistic. And so if the parents can just stay calm and confident that even the kids might be screaming horrible things at each other, because they're kids and or teens or whatever, and they can say really awful things sometimes. They don't have the same meaning to them that they do necessarily to us. And so a kid turns around and screams at another kid, I wish you were dead. Totally freaks out the parents to hear that kind of thing. But that's not the same for them. It's just an expression of I have these extreme strong emotions that I don't know what to do with, and I'm so angry, and I'm trying to say the worst possible thing I can think of to say. And if the parents can hear that kind of thing without getting their own emotions caught up, then they can help them a lot more, help them resolve the
Yeah.
problems. But, if you immediately react to that and start going, don't say that kind of thing, it's so awful, or, like get your own emotions involved, then you're part of the problem too. So, kind of
Yeah.
keep some perspective, remember they're kids.
Yep. Yes, I remember. Okay, let's move on to question number 4. I understand that just from, knowing you online and stuff, that your husband was a bit wary of unschooling for the first few years, as was mine. So I was wondering if you'd share a little bit about how you approached that.
Yes, we signed up for what in California we have these sort of hybrid school programs at the very beginning of the year when I didn't send them back to school in the fall. He wasn't happy with the idea, so I signed up for one of these programs, and we went to a meeting, And there were about 30 credentialed teachers standing in the front of the room because it was a huge program. And we sat in this meeting, and the teachers had, introduced themselves, and they each talked just for a few minutes. And like I said, in those days, it was all about John Holt and freedom and education. And so even though these were credentialed public school hired teachers, a lot of them talked the same way I did. And that was
Wow.
incredibly reassuring to him. So, even there were three of them there who had written a book about different ways of learning. And they didn't call it unschooling because I don't really think almost anybody did then. Unschooling and homeschooling were just kind of the same word,
Mm-hmm.
but they called it interest-driven learning, and they had written a book about it. And they talked about the benefits of supporting your kids' interests, and it all sounded really good. So that got me over that initial hump of that you're not using curriculum, you're not doing lessons, they're not getting grades, because he did hear that. So that was really helpful. I don't know that everybody in the world is going to be able to find a bunch of credentialed teachers to stand in front of their husband, but one of the things that you could find would be to find people at conferences. I think might be a similar kind of experience. And I think for my experience of speaking at conferences, and I've spoken at, I don't know, maybe 30, 35 conferences now, is that the dads get the most out of it, the slightly skeptical ones, because they come later and talk to me and they say that was really helpful. I really understand now what's going on, and you're right. I agree with you now. Like that's 100% on. And I know that being at conferences and seeing that you're not alone. It's not just your crazy wife who. I know what my husband thought. It was another one of my big hobbies that I was going to take up and then a few years later drop. And he didn't want to do that to the kids. He thought they needed the consistency of staying in school because he thought I would lose interest in a year or two. And he could have been right. I don't know. I couldn't really argue with that. All I could say is it just seems the right thing to do now. School is not working well, and this is the only thing that seems sensible. He hadn't done any of the reading I had done. I did so much. Even back when I was like in college, I had read John Holt and Summerhill and things like that. Had already completely developed my idea of what ideal education and learning would be. I just didn't think you could just do it on your own and not send them to school. And he didn't either. And he was concerned about legalities because my husband is from Iran. And he already has to deal with issues here in the United States, that the legal system is, sort of very different, and he had to worry about that.
Mm-hmm.
But he gained confidence from being in a room full of, there was parents and kids who were all homeschooling, and then all these teachers that were all talking about how great free learning is, being out of the classroom and everything. And he went to some unschooling conferences along the way, and I think those conferences made all the difference for him. He went to, we had some unschooling conferences in San Diego, which is not too far from me, and he came down to the San Diego conferences and met a lot of other unschooling families and heard some talks. And he didn't have a conversion. He was still sort of skeptical along the way. He would sometimes make comments like, don't they need to learn this? Like, shouldn't they learn this? Shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
they be like studying a little bit, like especially as they started to get older into their young teens. But on the other hand, he coaches soccer, and he was always coaching kids that were our kids' ages. And he was, let's say, very unimpressed with the behaviors, particularly of the kids,
Mm-hmm.
and with their attitudes. And our kids stood up really well in comparison. And so one of the things I kept telling him was, the particular information and the skills and things that they would be taught in school, those are a lot less important than their personality and their character and their behavior. And, those are the things that they're doing really well in. And so he once, I remember, he was concerned, like he'd heard my youngest daughter and her friend walking out from soccer practice, and the other girl had been asking her things like, well, do you know where Belgium is? Or, just factual kind of stuff. And he didn't think our daughter knew very much. and, and he was concerned. He said, don't you think they need to study geography or something? And And then I would just point out, I said, you know what, they know a lot. They've been playing Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego since they were little. I said, they know a lot. She knows way more than that other girl. That girl just knew where Belgium was. That's it. That's why she asked her
Yep.
that. She knew where that was, but Rosie could have turned around and asked her, where's Turkey or where's Germany? Or, she probably didn't know anything else. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think interaction with other kids helped him a little bit. But overall, the only thing that really helped was getting him to look at our own kids and look at what great people they were, that they were good hearted, generous, kind kids. And even that was difficult because he didn't really have a good concept of what was developmentally appropriate for kids, so he didn't even have that information to know that this was like normal behavior or this was even better than normal behavior. He didn't know that much. So there was a waiting game, I guess, where we just kind of waited and he enjoyed life with them and many times I said, I think you have to trust me. You either have to go do all the research or you're going to have to trust me on this,
Mm-hmm.
and he would just be okay. And it helped also, he wasn't at all impressed with our school system here in the United States. The school system that he'd grown up in, he went all the way through college, graduated from college home in Iran. It was harsh and demeaning and just awful and, horrifying to me. But to him, our schools were lax and didn't ask enough of the kids and didn't expect enough homework. And they went to school 6 days a week and went many more hours and had very harsh punitive punishments for not doing homework and not being prepared, physical punishments. And so when he looked at our
Wow.
schools, he thought our schools were kind of goofy and silly anyway. So he didn't really think, I think partly he didn't think I was going to do much worse than the schools, were doing because he
Yeah.
just thought the schools were so bad. But then I think at the beginning, he thought we were going to sort of switch over to the opposite, out school the schools and, you know, make them study all day, every day. And I think he was kind of shocked and appalled at you're just going to the beach again? What did you guys do today? I think he was bewildered, for a while. And then he just started seeing the results and, if just, was patient enough and enjoys life enough and was positive, and he started to see it, and started to see the negative results in other kids that he knew and started to see the good results in ours, and then started to gain faith. And some years, I'd say like 8 or 9, 10 years after we'd been in schooling, I overheard him on the phone talking to a friend and defending unschooling and telling him all about it. And well, we do this funny thing. We don't really homeschool. We do this thing called unschooling, and the kids just learn, and it's kind of amazing. And
Oh.
so even though he was still showing some skepticism and making some comments here and there, I think he was pretty well convinced, by
By that
by
point,
just
yeah.
the kids being there in front of him and seeing what they were doing. And then my kids all, because I teach at a college, my kids were able to utilize the college. They knew about college a lot, even when they were young. They'd come to my class and sit in the back of the room and color while I lectured, or, they were very comfortable and familiar with college. And one day, Roya was 13 or so, and she was walking around the college and she saw the ceramics studio and was like, "Can I do that?" I want to go make pottery. And so, we have that ability. She signed up and went and took a ceramics class at 13 or 14, and you know, that helped my husband to know that they were kind of connected to the college environment, that they were doing these college classes. I mean, they weren't going in and taking a college curriculum. They were taking what they were interested in, and
Just,
they
yeah.
used it like it was a recreation department class. Um, and that was, I think, reassuring that they could walk in there and do that and hold their own and, do well and interact with the teacher and the other students and be okay. So that helped a little bit. Um,
Huh.
it was just a
That,
play it by ear as you go along through the years kind of thing for us.
hmm yeah, that sounds pretty similar here too. I mean, we didn't have the lineup of teachers to go take him to. Nor did we have the open colleges,
Yeah, I do think
close by to take that. It was still the same thing, seeing the kind of people that they were becoming, the character and personalities and how well they understood themselves, and how that's longer picture more important than, as you said, the individual facts that they know where Belgium is or whatever.
yeah. Well, and I will say I wasn't above bad mouthing schools quite a bit, so that because he didn't know how things happened in schools, he was.
Yeah, that adds to
Yeah, and
yours.
so I wasn't above that. I would talk about why I hated the whole idea of what they were doing in schools. And schools were right at that time, schools were sort of making the big shift here over to the extreme accountability movement. And so they were boring, and the kids were doing nothing but preparing for testing all the time. And the kinds of there were no kids like on kids on his soccer teams. There were no kids that you would say, "Do you like school?" and they would say yes. Back when my kids were in school, it was a different era of educational philosophy being
Hmm.
implemented, and but that changed. That it changed right then. And so the kids in school, when my kids were in school, they would probably say they liked school. It was pretty fun. But not after that. After that, schools became just awful for kids. They were much, much worse. And it was all seat work. My kids were in classrooms that didn't have desks or anything like that. They just had
Yeah.
all kinds of different places to sit and hang out. They could go outdoors. They could be indoors. There was all kinds of stuff. But that just changed, and the schools just got awful. So they would sit like at a post-season soccer party, and my husband would sit there and talk to the kids on the soccer team, and they would just talk and talk and talk and talk about how awful school was, and they hated everything about it. So that helped that he had
Yeah.
contact with these kids who were in school, and they're they didn't come across well. They didn't love to learn. My kids talked about things they loved, and these kids talked about things they hated.
They hated. Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. Okay, well, we better move on to question five.
Okay.
Okay. One of the topics that regularly trips up newcomers to unschooling, as I've seen over the years, is TV watching. When they hear that experienced unschoolers don't restrict TV time, they're often taken aback, or what they'll call now is screen time. One, because it goes against all the conventional wisdom that we hear out there, and two, because of the behavior they see in their own children. They explain that they have restrictions because without them, their kids would do nothing but watch TV all day. And I have always loved your clear explanation of how restricting TV actually causes children to become more strongly attracted to it, the opposite of what the parent is trying to accomplish. So I was hoping you'd be able to take us through that.
I'll do that. Let me tell you something funny first, though. My
Sure.
daughters had a friend. They had friends whose family restricted TV a lot and were very negative about it. They had a little tiny TV, and it was in the bedroom. It was in the parents' bedroom. So the only time the kids could watch TV was when the parents were going to allow it, and it was very little. And they were very negative towards it. The father, they had one at all because the dad watched it, and the mom was really um, not nice about how the dad watched it. She would complain about it a lot in front of the kids, and yeah,
Mm-hmm.
he's back in the bedroom watching TV again, stuff like that. So that was the atmosphere there. And one night, one of our kids went back and forth between houses a lot. And one night, one of their kids was spending the night at our house, and they had turned the TV on to watch something. And then my daughter had fallen asleep. She often falls asleep still at almost 25 watching TV.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very, very common for her to do that. I would say almost daily. So they had laid down all their sleeping bags on the floor, and they had the TV on, and they were watching something, and she'd already fallen asleep, and the other girl was still awake, but I went to bed, and I got up in the morning, and the other girl was still sitting up watching the TV, and she had both her hands up to her face. She was holding her own eyelids open.
Oh my
And
goodness.
I looked at her and said, "What are you doing?" And she said, she just looked at me like in a daze, and she said, "I'm watching TV." Like, and they were about, I would say, 7 or 8 years old at that time. They were little,
Wow.
9 maybe. And so I had that really like early extreme sort of like a notice given to me, like this is what would happen if you didn't let them ever watch TV. And so that got me really thinking about it. But we had not restricted TV in our house because my husband grew up without any TV because he grew up without any electricity. And he never saw colored television until he came to this country at the age of 23. And he loved television. He had he didn't have any of the anti-TV stuff. To him, growing up, TV was still like it probably was in the 40s and 50s in North America. He was still delighted by it. It was like he'd been watching, American TV shows back home in grainy black and white and came here and got to see them in good quality color and loved it. So there was no anti-TV-ness in this house except from me. And there was a long time where I didn't want a big giant TV in the house, when the kids were really little. I'm talking about when my oldest daughter was like 1 or 2, where I thought, well, we would not have TV because it's not good for children and they shouldn't watch TV until they already know how to read and all this kind of stuff. And it caused nothing but conflict between my husband and myself because he was the one who really loved it. And every year he'd get a Christmas bonus or whatever they call it, a holiday bonus. And he'd say, I'm going to use it to buy a bigger TV. And I'd say, we don't need that big TV. If you're going to have that, you're going to get something to cover it up with, or, because I don't want that big monster thing like sitting in our living room. And after a few years of this, and this had nothing to do with the children. It had only to do with my husband. But I had a major turnaround where I thought, what are you doing? Like, he loves this. Why are you being so nasty about it, Pam?
Yeah.
And I just had, I remember the moment I was driving up to our own house. My husband was in the house watching sports on TV, and I drove up and I had this moment as I walked in and I looked and I saw him and he was so happy and he was enjoying it so much. And I thought, why shouldn't he spend the money on a big TV that he can really enjoy? And I walked in the house and said that immediately. Like, I just walked in and said, you know what? We should get a really big TV. You like this. You really like this. And so I had that experience too. And so that was, I don't even know if I'd had my youngest daughter yet. So that was, by the time I had kids, I was over the anti-TV thing myself. So I thought about it. And as an economist, we have this concept called diminishing marginal utility. And it means that each additional amount of something that you have has a little bit less value for the extra bit. So, for example, if you have an ice cream cone with 1 scoop on it, that first scoop is absolutely the most delicious thing in the world. When you have a second scoop on it, the second scoop adds to your total satisfaction, but the second scoop isn't as miraculously, fabulously wonderful as the first scoop was. And the third scoop, if you get a third scoop, the third scoop isn't nearly as good as the second scoop. You get it because you want more, but it's not as fabulous. So if you have already had 3 scoops of ice cream and someone offers you a 4th, you can maybe take it or leave it. At some point, people's extra utility or extra benefit of having 1 more of something, it gets smaller and smaller as you have more and more of that thing within a certain time period, within a given time period. And so that applies to everything, and that includes television. And so if a kid is only allowed to watch an hour a day, another hour is worth really a lot. If they're allowed to watch 2 hours a day, the third hour is worth less than the second hour. If they're allowed to watch however many hours they want, they will watch until the marginal utility of another hour of TV isn't as high as the marginal utility of something else that they might want to do. But if you restrict it, then the marginal utility of 1 more hour of TV is pretty much always higher than the marginal utility of anything else that they might do. And so by restricting it, you create a situation where the level of attachment to having 1 more hour is extremely high. And parents will often say they just don't want to do anything else. And I'm going to say they don't want to do anything else right now. They won't want to do anything else unless they can have another hour of TV. Sometimes with parents who have restrictions, even 1 more hour can make a big difference in what their kids decide to do. 1 more hour can be enough to satisfy them if they've been restricted to 1 hour a day or TV on weekends only or something like that. Then allowing even a relaxation of the restrictions can mean that the marginal utility goes down, and suddenly all these other things around them in their life have higher marginal utility than that. It's all relational. It's all in relationship to each other, what you choose to do. Does this thing have the highest marginal utility, or does that? I'm going to do the thing that has the highest marginal utility. So if you restrict it, you create an artificially high level of marginal utility for television. If you don't restrict it, it'll go down.
That makes sense.
It's just a fact. It's how humans behave. It's the same thing with food. It's the same thing with any other, it's the basis a little bit for the whole idea of reverse psychology. They give them a whole lot and then they won't want so much. But it's true. It's a fact of human behavior. Entire huge economic theories are based on this kind of simple idea of, it's an observation of human behavior. It's not a made up thing.
Well, yeah, because when you're going to make a choice, you're going to, evaluate the value or the marginal utility of each and choose which one means more to you.
I could just ask you, so what's your favorite food? You have a favorite food? And you could tell me, yes, my favorite food is, and my favorite food is spaghetti. I love spaghetti. And then I would say, did you eat anything besides spaghetti this week? And you would say, yes, you ate something else besides spaghetti. Well, if your favorite food is spaghetti, why didn't you only eat spaghetti the whole time? And your answer is probably going to be something like, well, I like to have some variety too. My answer is because after you eat spaghetti 2 or 3 times in a row, the marginal utility of another meal of spaghetti is now lower than the marginal utility of something else. It's the reason that we like variety is because of the law of diminishing marginal utility. So parents create this, really pretty awful dynamic in their house where they are these police who restrict TV and other things by restricting it at a point where the marginal utility is still really, really, really high. So, my response to people is, if you're going to restrict it, give them significantly more, and then you won't have to battle. The battles will get smaller and smaller as the restrictions get less and less. If they can try that, then they maybe can come to an actual belief that no restrictions are actually okay too, because the marginal utility will go down enough that the kids will choose to do other things. And if they don't, it's because the marginal utility, the benefit that they're getting out of that is so high that that's probably the best thing for them to be doing, because because if they're really getting that much out of it, then there's something really beneficial to them, that they're really getting a lot of satisfaction out of it. Or the alternative is, I guess, that the alternatives aren't very good. Maybe you need to spice up the life around them a little bit so that the marginal utility of other things is a little higher. It's a lazy way to raise children to just say, turn it off. It's just being lazy. It's being not creative enough to think about what else there is in their life. If there's a reason, there's always a reason. If that was true, that you had no restrictions and they really did nothing else, which is what people say, they would only watch TV all day. If that was really true, then it means that there's nothing else going on in their life that's better than TV. And that's just sad. And that means that the rest of life needs to be spiced up. Or they really love TV. So I have a TV loving daughter. All my kids watch TV. I watch TV. We all love it. Talk about it a lot. It's fun. TV is really good now. TV wasn't really as good back, 20 years ago as it is these days. The TV shows were not the kind of long-term story cycle arc kind of thing that they have now. So the TV as literature, I guess, if you want to call it that, is way higher quality now. So, when we were watching something like, Laverne and Shirley, or, some kind of slapstick comedy thing, I can see that parents might have thought that that was a bigger waste of time or something, but it wasn't. It was high, it was something that the kids were getting a lot out of, and you just don't know what they're getting out of it. You're not in their brain. So one of my daughters was the one who really loved television and really watched a lot and watched the same things over and over and over and over and over again. She watched the Roseanne show a lot, and she watched the Cosby Show a lot. And for about a year, she watched both of those shows daily for several hours. And after about a year, one day we were driving in the car and she said, the Cosbys aren't really, everybody thinks the Cosbys are these really great parents, the Huxtables, I guess, in the show, are
Yep.
these really great parents, and they're really not. They're just mean to the kids. They make fun of them. They'll ridicule them to make a joke, and they never change their minds, and they're really restrictive. And if they once say something, then the parents just have, it's as if the parents are like perfect and the kids are like little brats. And on Roseanne, everybody thinks Roseanne and Dan are like these weird, mean parents and stuff. But Roseanne, she might yell and do something mean, but she'll go up and sit on the edge of the bed and say, okay, I thought about it. And, they're really thoughtful, and they really try to help their kids as much as they can. And, so all this time she'd been watching these shows and she'd been doing parenting in her head, it had been all about the family relationships, and she'd been doing, a compare and contrast exercise in her head for the previous year. And this is an abiding interest in her. She was probably 10 when this was going on, and she's 25 almost now, and she still spends a lot of her time thinking about relationships and parenting and, children and development and, how people treat each other and things like that. So you just don't know what it is they're getting out of it. So to say that they're sitting there staring at a screen, I mean, nothing drives me more crazy than when parents say they're staring at the screen, or they're staring at the screen like a zombie, because their brain is actively working and learning and thinking. Yeah. And just because they're not expressing it to you doesn't mean it's not happening. So, we got so much out of television, and still do. And, we still love it, and it's been a source of great enjoyment and fun and learning all kinds of things, all kinds of TV. Yeah. And there's the thing about no restrictions also, one last thing is that parents assume that if you have no restrictions that their kid will watch the way they watch intensely, like when they have restrictions. But as long as you have the restrictions, they'll probably always use every minute of the allowable time. And then after you relieve them of those limits, they will probably watch every minute of their life for a while. But after a while, when they really are confident that they can just turn it off and turn it on whenever they want, then they will start making those kinds of choices. But so it can be a little, I get it that it can be a little freaky for parents, to just think of no limits at all, because they have the experience of their kids begging and arguing and cheating. And, we have another family that they were unschoolers. They had TV limits and computer limits, and the parents' bedroom was upstairs at the other end of the house. And during the night, the kids would sneak downstairs and use the computer and watch television, while the parents were sleeping and didn't know. And so again, you don't want to set up a situation where kids are sneaking around behind your back. That's another problem. Or they're watching at a friend's house and they know they're not supposed to, and so now they feel guilty, and or yeah. They just feel guilty that they even like it, because you so obviously think it's this horrible thing, and yet they love it. And so how are they going to grow up thinking that this thing that is so enjoyable to them and so appealing is something so awful? How are they going to trust their own sense of what's good and what's not?
I know, it has such a big impact, doesn't it? Just all over the place. It just really digs into their psyche even.
Parents ask, like, what if we just don't have one in the house? My husband and I don't want one. So what if we don't have the TV in our house? And, my answer to that is like, what if you said, like, what if we just don't have books in our house? What if we just don't have books?
Yeah.
That seems so goofy now looking back, that you would like just not have this fabulous technology that's so enjoyable and so rich with learning opportunities. To just like not have it seems really odd and just like a strange kind of goofy decision. It seems as silly to me now as saying we're just not going to have any books, no books in our house, or no music allowed in our house, or no art, or, like it seems as silly as that, and obviously comes out of a fear. And, I think it's a good thing to work on getting over that. It's a silly fear. It's a fear based on believing a bunch of so-called experts who measured children's or people's brain waves, 30 years ago, and neglected to mention that the changes in your brain that happen when you watch TV are the same ones that often happen when you meditate, so here are these people who are like meditating every day, but refusing to have a TV in their house, so, um, and there's a lot of studies about video games, computers, TV use, and all that stuff. And the studies, I always like studies. I'm a statistician, and I think they're interesting, but they're not very good. That kind of research is not very well done in general. And so
Mm-hmm.
just to buy into it without even understanding the research that was done, to quote studies or to, link to papers about research that you haven't really looked into and understood is not really very good. Because if you look at your own kids and your friends, unschooling friends, and look at those kids, they are so obviously far from being damaged by television and video game. They are being enhanced. Their lives are better and their learning is great. And, it's look at the evidence that's in front of us, and, don't rely on studies that you don't even really know how they were done and who they were done on and what they really measured and, what the circumstances of the study were, because they're, in general, when I go and look at this kind of research, I'm not impressed at all. It's not very good research.
Yeah, I know. People seem, I guess it takes time to get there, but they have a hard time trusting themselves. They're still,
Yeah.
giving over to experts without actually looking at it in enough detail to understand, because they don't trust themselves and what they're seeing in front of them with their own kids.
And I understand that, because when you have a child, you're filled with fear that something bad will happen, or that you'll damage them, or that you'll not do the right thing. And,
Mm-hmm.
to not allow it seems almost, I mean, I get that it seems like the safer route. People will just
Mm-hmm.
say, kind of exasperated, like, they don't need to be watching that much. Well, that's true. They don't need it. They don't need it the way they need, like, water every day, like, they don't need it. And so I get it that it seems kind of like safer to just restrict it or not have it, because people are overwhelmed with the information and don't know how to make a decision. And, the only answer to that is to use your own logic and look at your own kids and base it on your own experience, and look around at again, get to know other unschooled kids so that you can see what their experiences have been. I just dare anybody to look at my kids and say they were damaged by watching TV. They've gone to college, they've got multiple degrees, they've got careers, they're fine, and they
Yeah.
watched and still watch a ton of television. We love it. I don't
Mm-hmm.
quite get why people think it's different than going to the theater. And we're a big theater family. I have a daughter with a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in drama. We're very involved in the theater world. There are things on television that are better than anything you could see in a theater. There are things in theater that are better than anything you can see on television. They're both, like, really fabulous, but nobody thinks there's anything wrong with taking your kid to the opera. Now you're doing it. Now you're doing the right thing. Take your kid to the ballet, take your kid to see a musical, or a play. Those, you're highly respected for doing that. But,
Whether or not your
so
kid
so
wants to
when
go.
yeah, well, when I have a daughter who does really, really loves opera, and, we had season tickets to the opera, and, that sounds really impressive to people. Whoa, your daughter must be, like, amazing. She must be brilliant. She loves opera. But, you say, well, and she loves to watch, some TV show. Nobody's impressed at all. But
Yeah.
those TV shows are fabulously good quality, wonderful writing. Or just like like theater, like play, like opera, like ballet, they might not be fabulously good, but there are things about them that we're enjoying and that we're getting out of them. And there's not that big of a distinction, between these forms of entertainment, learning. And it's, the same people that would think going to the theater is, like, fabulous learning and criticize television. They're just not really connecting the concepts. They're not really putting that
Yeah.
together very well in their own heads. And so the only answer to that is think more open-mindedly about it. Don't, if you hear yourself sort of repeating platitudes that you've read in some book, then try to break out of that, and try to think for yourself and look at your own kids and, look at what's fun. Fun and happiness are the best guide. to whether good learning is happening.
Yep. No, I love that. That's exactly where, looking to their joy, because that's how they get engaged. That's how they stay engaged, is because they're enjoying themselves and having fun. Anyway, okay, we should move on to question number 6, and we're going to shift a little bit. As a economics and statistics professor, I'm sure you're very comfortable with math, and I went to university and practiced as an engineer and systems developer, so I'm very comfortable with math as well. But it's an area that can be challenging for some people to figure out as they explore unschooling, especially since school and the way they've probably grown up with math and the way they see math is mostly boiled down to worksheets. So we'll just touch on this, and I have 2 questions for you. The first one is if you can talk about how you see learning math through unschooling, and then if you can maybe suggest some activities for parents who are more on the math phobic side that they might enjoy with their children.
Yeah, it's a huge topic.
just quick.
So let me start with saying, I bet that you have a little math anxiety too. And I don't think almost anybody, even those of us who did well in math and went into careers that involved a lot of math, we didn't escape it entirely. So if we were in a group of people and I sort of like listed a bunch of numbers really fast and said, Pam, did you add those up? You might have a moment of feeling flustered, like, oh, really? Like she expected me to do that in my head in front of people?
Okay, I have a very quick math anxiety story. Which is from grade 5 maybe. So they were trying to get us to memorize the timetables, right? And we were doing the 3 times table, and the teacher had done he put a circle up, and he the numbers 1 to 15 or something in random order in the circle, and he would test everybody each morning. You had to say the answers for the three times table or whatever times tables as fast as you could. And so those of us who could go really, really fast. And then one day when we were doing the 3 times tables, he had us do it backwards. And most of us froze.
Yeah.
What? No, this is the order that I know them in.
I have a very similar experience, and it had to do with times tables, where I remember that exact thing because suddenly part of this is because I was expected at that point already. I was good at this kind of thing. And so they put me on the spot. And I had the same fear and stuff of making a mistake and being shamed and stuff as anybody else has. And had the same kinds of anxieties and can still have them. I teach economics. I have to do math in front of 30 or 40, 50 students because they'll ask questions, and I'm standing up at the board with my marker in my hand, and I have to stand there real quickly and multiply 0.9 times 118 or something in front of people. And I have been doing this for 30 something years, and I still stand there and have a moment of like, oh God, what if I get this wrong? This is so embarrassing. And so I've learned to get over that by joking about it and helping my students feel less anxious about it by myself being open about feeling anxious about it. So I turn around and go, wow, all these eyes on me, and I'm trying to do arithmetic in front of you. This isn't hard or anything, I try to make a joke out of it and make them feel more comfortable and realize that I feel uncomfortable about it too. But we all have that. We haven't been able to escape it. That's just in everybody. It's a level of phobia that people have can be really extreme, or it can be just these little moments that we have. But most people, I can't speak for everywhere else, but in the United States for sure, most people have math anxiety. I would say everyone has some level of math anxiety, and a very large majority of people have enough math anxiety that it's really limiting them in some way in their lives. 70-something% of college students say they chose their major based on not having to do math. Um,
Wow.
and when I ask my college students about that, they all say that. And many of my college students want to be business majors or engineers, and they say they're changing because I'm at a teaching freshmen, and they say when they got there and realized how much math they needed, they're going to change their major.
Wow.
Because they don't want to do that. So they're talking about other kinds of majors because they didn't realize how much more math they were going to have to take to do the majors that they had thought they were going to do when they entered college. um, and so anyway, yes, math anxiety and math phobia are just epidemic. And so the first thing that I would say to unschooling parents about math is you can't probably do worse than the schools. This is the one thing that the schools are so bad at, so terrible, that not doing anything at all is way better, because what they're creating is a real problem. And by doing nothing, and by doing nothing, I mean just by ignoring the subject, pretending it doesn't exist, not thinking of it as a
Yep.
subject. By doing nothing, you'll still have a lot of math happening in your lives. And you know, the kids are going to learn all that stuff. They're going to learn to tell time, and they're going to learn to measure, and they're going to learn to add and subtract. And probably at some point they'll learn multiplying because it's a shortcut for addition, and it's makes sense to do it that way. In fact, you might
Mm-hmm.
be lucky enough to get the experience of a kid discovering it for themselves, and it's so fun when they get it. And they'll come in and they'll say, 4 times 8, is whatever it is. Anxiety. I have to say it out loud. So they'll come in and say, what something is, and they'll say that's just the same as 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8. They'll just like come in and tell you about it as if it's this thing they just learned that's brand new and that nobody ever had it before. That's the best thing in the world if they figure that out. If they come up with that themselves, that's when
Mm-hmm.
they really know it, they really learned it. Memorizing multiplication tables is a convenient thing for some people sometimes. It depends on what you end up doing with your life. Sometimes it's convenient.
Yep.
For me, economics involves a lot of math. I do statistics. It's convenient for me not to have to like pull out my phone and multiply on the calculator to know them.
Yep.
It's nothing more than a convenience. There are a lot of things that are convenient in the world. Having anxiety and basing a whole like life of torturing children with math homework and things like that to make sure that they've learned this thing that's kind of convenient sometimes for some people seems really ridiculous. If they're going to use it a lot, they'll pick it up. And if you're, as an unschooling parent, if your kid figures it out for themselves and comes and tells you about it, that's a really cool moment and it's really fun. And it happened to me once with multiplying with my older daughter and once with division with my middle daughter, where she suddenly figured out that division was just repeated subtraction. And she figured it out in a really practical way and for a reason, that she had something that she was figuring out and she needed to subtract something over and over and over and over again. And, that figured out that was what division was. That if you divide. And so the important thing is that they get the feeling for things, that they get the concepts, that they understand, the reasons why they're doing things, and the notation and the little techniques and stuff like that can all come later. It can be all added on. But teaching math as worksheets and algorithms and just how to do it from the beginning, it's ridiculous. It's like trying to teach kids how to read that don't know how to talk yet, or don't know how to hear, don't even know what language is. It would be, it's not even sensible to try to do that. So kids can parrot back things beautifully. So they can tell you that, 2 times 3 is 6 and 3 times 3 is 9 and 4 times 3 is 12. And they can repeat all those, and you can be really proud that your kid can memorize really well like that. It doesn't mean anything. I was in high school when I realized that multiplication was just a form of addition and that addition was a form of counting. And I never realized that division was repeated subtraction. I didn't know that.
Yep.
I didn't even put that together. I knew it was the opposite of multiplying, but I didn't even really know what that meant. And so you can be really, really good at doing math worksheets and taking tests and not really have a good grasp of what's going on and what you're doing at all. And I was like that. I got perfect grades in math all the way through and was, excelled and didn't have a good idea of what was going on, what I was doing and where I would use it. It's a perfectly legitimate question to say, why do we need to know this? And and if you don't have a good answer for that, if your only answer for that is to be prepared for the next level of math, you got to
Yeah.
be ready for next year, If that's the only answer, that's a terrible answer. So what should parents be doing instead? Lots of fun things. Almost every single thing that you do in life involves math. Every time when you do anything, whether you're doing somersaults on the floor or you're cooking or you're walking in the park or you're surfing or flying a kite, or everyday life involves a lot of higher order mathematics, and we don't have to call it that. And if parents want the kids to be a little more aware of it, all they have to do is think out loud a little bit more. So that's easy. So when you walk up to the registers, just sort of think out loud and say, I wonder which line we should get into. And have a little conversation with, I don't know, well, that one's moving faster, but that person has a lot of stuff in their cart. This is actual math. This isn't a joke. I'm not making this up. This is the kind of thing that then they can think back on if later on they do go into formal math and they're solving simultaneous equations. They will be comfortable with this kind of thinking. So it's algebraic thinking that's probably, the most important thing for them to experience. And it's when they're younger, they need to experience things that involve measurement, comparisons, seeing symmetry, measurement of all kinds, like, linear measurements, like with rulers and yardsticks or whatever you use, and volume, playing in the bathtub with things that hold water. If they can get as much of that kind of experience as possible and not waste their time sitting doing worksheets, they will be way better off when they do try to put formal notation and do actual math algorithms. It'll all fall into place. It'll just be putting notation to things that they already fully understand. So that's all getting concepts down, and it's all done through experience and conversation.
That's cool.
Are you there?
I thought I lost you for a second.
Then the other thing would be through the really, really, if you can't stand to just not do anything, the other thing would be to play games. So card games, board games, video games, circle games, playing outdoors, any kind of games, those all involve a lot of math. Get over the idea that math involves just numbers. Numbers are great, and I love numbers, and I'm a statistician. I love numbers, but get over the idea that that's what math is. The numbers are notation. That's like saying the letters are language. Letters are not language. Letters are things that we use to express language. It's part of the toolkit. The toolkit. That's what numbers are. Numbers are like letters. They're not the math. They're the tools that we use to express the mathematical ideas and problems and concepts. And then the one last thing I would say to moms is that please don't act like you're an idiot when it comes to math. This is the one and probably only time that I say, put on an act for your kids and act like you love it, because it's very bad for you to be saying, I'm just terrible at math. I'm going to tell your dad, ask your dad when he gets home. And because the amount of people that still believe that women and girls are not good at math, that they don't have math brains, that's still really high. That myth is still believed by so many people. And so try not to pass that on to your kids, boys or girls. It's not true. There's no difference in male and female brains that makes males better at math. And in fact, you could make the argument that males are better at math, and you could make the argument that males are worse at math. There's a bigger variability. So when they do standardized testing of various kinds, boys get the lowest scores. I'm talking about elementary age kids and high school kids. Boys get the lowest scores and boys get the highest scores. Girls have less variation. But, there's no reason for that. It's entirely environmental. It's entirely how they were raised. And
That's, yeah.
so I would say that for moms, unschooling moms, like that's one of the things you can do to help your kids is just stop acting like there's something wrong with you, that you just can't do it, because you could if you wanted to. And you know, parents, who have a lot of math anxiety, they should try to get over it. It's like they owe it to their kids to kind of work on that. And one way to work on it is to sort of go back to the beginning and learn some more math so that you don't feel like you don't have, like the confidence to answer questions. But if you don't have that interest and you really don't want to do that because you have so much math anxiety, or that it's uncomfortable and miserable and the whole idea of it makes you break out in a sweat, then at least don't pass on to your kids the idea that you can't do it because you're female.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. Okay, let's move on to question number 8. You've been actively involved with the Homeschool Association of California's annual conference for many years. I had the pleasure of speaking there a couple of years ago. What are some of the benefits of going to a conference that you've seen for newer unschooling families? You mentioned when we were talking about dads, how great, helpful that can be to see other families having made that choice and to talk to some of the older kids. So maybe you just want to quickly touch on if there's any other benefits that you've experienced. And congratulations on getting Jane McGonigal to speak this year.
Yeah, that was wonderful. Jane McGonigal is the author of Reality is Broken. It is a fabulous book about the benefits and future of video games. She's a video game developer.
Yeah.
And she's just a fantastic speaker, and I think it's going to be really exciting. Some of the other benefits, one is conferences are just really fun for most of us. They're just a really good time because for most of us, there aren't times when we can be surrounded by other parents and kids who treat each other with such love and respect, where you don't constantly hear parents berating their children for one misstep after another. So that's a pretty wonderful environment to spend a little time in. And it can really give you a big boost for maintaining that environment in your own home. So that's, I think when my kids were younger, that was, I would come home from a conference just feeling so refreshed and dedicated to the idea that I wanted a family life where we treated each other that way, and with so much respect for everybody, and not that kind of respect where I say I demand respect, but actual respect.
Yeah.
I once used that word in front of a young man, and he said, "I hate that word. Please don't ever use that word again." And I was like, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, that's what my dad says when he's about to hit me."
Oh.
So that's not what I meant.
Yeah.
So that's one thing, is it's just really an invigorating kind of environment. It's I think there's a lot to be said for just knowing that there are a lot of other people who care about this kind of thing and are doing the same thing, so you don't feel so isolated and maybe start to question whether you're crazy, because we all have bad times, and we all have times where we think things aren't going well and we question whether we've done the right thing. And, it can be really helping and boosting your confidence, to be part of a big group doing that. And I always got new ideas. And, my kids are grown, and I'm not really an unschooling parent at the moment. But I still learn new things about unschooling at every conference, and a new way to look at it and a new insight. And so the amount of new learning that I did as an unschooling mom was just tremendous at every conference. Spine-tingling, wonderful, exciting learning for myself. Sometimes there's just the mere fact of getting to see a panel with some grown unschoolers and to see how articulate they are, and how much energy, positive energy they have, and how enthusiastic they are. And to hear that they've chosen to go into so many different fields. And, the people these days are so lucky to have so many grown unschoolers who have done so many things, and they can see the results that all these things are possible. It's people, I think, sometimes worry that they're limiting their kids by not sending them to conventional schools, that they won't be able to do what they want to do. And when you see all these grown unschoolers and hear about all the things that they've chosen to do, you realize that you're not limiting them, you're opening up the world to them.
Yeah.
There are very few things that not going to school is going to keep you from doing, and I mean, one of them is in the United States is professional football. There's not really very many options you have to kind of go to high school in order to go to college to play professional football, because that's the way the professional football leagues work. They don't have
Work.
their own farm teams like baseball has and other sports. So
Ah.
if you don't go to high school and then you don't get recruited for a good college, then you don't get into the um, American football pros. So there you go. If that's the
There's
one thing
one.
that's important, I guess that might be one, but there really aren't any others that I know of that would really require someone to have gone to school. That's it. So they're not going to miss out on anything. And that can be at conferences, that can be one of the big takeaways, is that there's so many options that you're opening up to kids, because they can do so much as they get older, and they can travel, and not being restricted and having a lot of freedom to have made a lot of their own choices. They're often so much more ready to do things. Um, one of my daughters went on a study abroad program, and she was in Paris for a few months. This was when she was college age, not high school age. And for many of the young college students in this program, it was their first time being away from home, and they spent most of their time drinking. And she was just like, I'm in Paris. I'm not going to spend all my time getting drunk. I'm going to spend all my time going to all the fabulous things that I can get to experience in Paris, And but when kids I think when you're at a conference, you get to see that all the options. You talk to lots of people and hear a lot of stories, and it just is really exciting. On the other hand, it's not for everybody, and it can be kind of wild and can be kind of intense, and people are very excited to be there. um, it's super, super fun and exciting for some people, and sometimes overwhelming for some people who kind of just want to go in their room and watch TV because
Yep. Yeah.
they're get tired really fast. But even if all you get to do is just go to a few talks, and just walk around and kind of absorb the environment of a conference, I think it can just be really confidence building. That's the number one thing from a conference, is just the confidence that you can gain. Like, all these are normal people. They're just like me, and they're doing it, and I can do it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I really like the point that, it may not be a great fit for you, or even maybe even for your kids
Yeah,
as an environment, but to go there without expectations on yourself that you have to become this person that loves all this and does all this to understand yourself enough to, like you said, maybe take in a few talks, maybe walk around and be okay with how it works for you and how it fits well for you.
yeah.
Question number 9, and you've touched on this a little bit too. We've had some great conversations. As you mentioned, all of your daughters, all 3 of them, chose to go to college. Maybe starting with as a rec center concept at age 13, taking a few classes. Plus, as you said, you teach and you see lots of school kids as well in your classes. Can you speak a little bit about the advantages that you've seen in going to college from unschooling?
Oh, the advantages of going to college from unschooling are huge. School kids come to college burned out, absolutely just not interested in learning almost at all. There are even the best of the students that come to college from high school are tired of it. They're just wanting to go through the motions, take the classes they have to take, get through it. They're not in a class with an interest in learning very much. It's more extreme than I can even express. They will do anything to just get the grade and get out of there. And I'm talking about the good, mediocre, poor students. All of them have the same attitude. That is just understood as being a normal attitude for a college student. There is
Yeah.
almost no relish for learning. Nobody walks into a classroom on the first day with just like, I've been wanting to learn more about economics, and I'm so excited to be here. The best you can hope for is that they're willing to learn and that they're glad to learn, but they're not
Mhm.
excited about it. They're not eager. It's not the reason they're there. I had one of my best students this semester, young man, very, very intelligent. He walked me out to the parking lot one night and he was just like, I just want to apologize. I'm way smarter than I look in your class. And I said, okay. And I said, so, and he goes, I just have so many other things going on in my life, and all I'm doing in this class is the bare minimum to get through it. And that's what I'm just doing in college. And he said, I know that's what I'm doing. And, maybe that's wrong, but, you know, it's not what I really want to do, but I need the degree. And I mean, he
Yeah.
just flat out openly admitted it. And that's like the best you can hope for in a college student. My kids and all of the other unschoolers I know who went to college were somewhat disillusioned about other humans because when they got there, they thought they were going to this institution of higher learning, and what they found out was that the other students were not very interested in learning. And not only that, to some degree, resented them for being so interested and thought they were odd.
Yeah.
The teachers loved them for the most part. The teachers were just like crazy about them.
Yeah.
Um, but they felt like the other students. I have heard many stories of unschooled kids coming home to their parents and saying, I don't get it. Like, it's like they have some kind of brain damage. They just don't want to learn. They're not interested. They just want to just go through the motions and do what they have to do to get the grade. So there's a huge distinction between these unschooled kids and kids who have gone to school. And it's noticeable. And I can tell, I have had a few in my class who I didn't know because I live in a place where there's a lot of unschoolers, and I don't know them all. And I have had a few kids who have, sat in my classroom and asked questions and had shining eyes who you could tell were really happy to get their questions answered and things like that. And I would chat with them later and go, so where'd you go to school? Oh, I didn't go to school. And it was obvious. It was very obvious. And my kids made friends with a couple of people in college. And of course, in college, nobody asks you like much about high school or going to school. So a lot of times they would make friends with people and they wouldn't even know that they hadn't gone to school, or, that just doesn't come up. It's not. And my kids made friends with a couple of people that they only found out, and they kind of just gravitated toward each other and made friends. And this happened several different times where it turned out later they got to talking, went, wait, you were homeschooled? So was I. Wait, what? So they were even kind of more attracted to these other kids who didn't go to school, because they were the other kids who seemed alive in a classroom, and those were the ones they wanted to be hanging out with and stuff. So that happened. My kids loved college for the most part. They thought of college as a place where there were people who were paid to help them. One of my daughters Roya came out of her first English class. I went to pick her up and she came and got in the car, and she jumped in the car and was so excited and said, I just can't believe there's somebody who's paid to read what I write and critique it. Because she liked to write. She was a writer.
Yeah.
And, mom wasn't ever critical enough.
Yeah.
And she wanted that criticism, So they really liked it for the most part. They thought there was a lot of really stupid, red tape and rules and bureaucracy, and teachers were awful sometimes. And, they saw all that. They saw silly stuff, and they saw teachers who didn't care, and they saw teachers who weren't very nice. But overall, the level of resources that were available in college and the people that were there for them to talk to and get help from was fabulous for them. They really, really liked it. And they used it to the maximum extent. They got involved in everything. They went to everything at the college. They'd go to the, everything going on at the college. They would keep up with it, and they knew about it. Two of mine, oddly, joined sororities, which was unexpected, and got really, really involved and are still involved as alumni with their sororities, and really enjoyed that and really got a lot out of it. And of course, I didn't know what sororities were like. I didn't know that they were philanthropic organizations, and that's what my kids got really involved in, all of the philanthropy, work of the sororities, um, and had a great time. So, overall, I think there were just college offered them lots and lots and lots of opportunities to do a lot of things, all in kind of a centralized place with people who were paid to help you do them. So that's how they experienced it.
Well, that's a great way of looking at it
I
too.
remember one time Roya telling me that her fellow students she was in a program, and fellow students were asking her repeatedly, like, how do you get such high grades? How do you always get such high grades? And she finally kind of exasperatedly turned around and said, stop worrying about your grades all the time and just learn.
Surprise.
Yeah. like I don't think about my grades, and I get high grades because I do all the work and I'm into it and I'm enthusiastic, and I do more than what the teachers ask. I read, like I watch things.
Well, yeah, I think that's something that through school, they're trained just to focus on the curriculum, right?
Yeah.
Because that's just where they'll get their marks, and the marks is what they need. And it becomes about the marks and the grades, not about the topic and the learning.
Yeah.
Very early on in their career.
Well, unfortunately, very early. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, pretty much at 4 or 5 years old at this point. Yeah.
Yep. Oh, I know. All right. Now, question number 10. Looking back now, what for you has been the most valuable outcome from choosing unschooling with your family?
The close relationships that we have. Absolutely. No other thing could come close to that. There is nothing more important than relationships. That's it.
That's it. Yep.
So we didn't go through awful teen years where we battled. We didn't go through, we don't have that kind of thing where the kids are like, yeah, I like my family, but I like them 3,000 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't have that kind of relationships. Like I said, my kids, they talk to each other constantly. I hear from them every day. I see them frequently. Our lives are still as, completely like fun and intertwined, and, the most fun we have is when we're all together. And so that kind of relationship is the best part.
That's awesome. That's a great place to end it too. I I'm hesitating because that's exactly if someone asks me what's the biggest outcome, the relationships, because those are the things that also last a lifetime. Those are the things that bring you the joy. That's the whole point in the end.
Yeah.
Yep.
Nothing
Anyway,
else
I
matters.
wanted exactly. Thanks so much for taking the time to speak with me today, Pam.
Thank you. Thank you.
I really enjoyed diving into unschooling with you. I love hearing your perspective on things. I've loved reading your perspective on things for years, so it's been great to have you on here.
Thank you.
And I wanted to ask, where's the best place for people to connect with you online in case they'd like to learn some more?
Well, I have a little blog that I don't write on very much, but it's got a little bit of cool stuff on it, and that's called learninghappens.wordpress.com. It's got some stuff about unschooling math and basic principles of unschooling, and it's got a whole bunch of fun, super easy games to play, because I really like games where you can just pull it out of your pocket at the moment when you're like waiting in the doctor's office and things like that. So I have a whole lot of games that involve nothing but some coins or pencil and paper, things like that I have on there that are really fun. So that might be cool. And then, some other stuff that I've written here and there. And then the Radical Unschooling Families Facebook group and the Unschooling Mom to Mom Facebook group are the two places that I am. I'm posting more on the Unschooling Mom to Mom group. So that's probably the number one place where they can find me.
And
it's Mom to Mom
conference.
With the number 2.
With the number 2, yeah.
And then
no spaces.
HSC conference in California. It's in San Francisco at the end of July, beginning of August every year. I'm always there, always speaking. And then I'll be speaking in Phoenix at the Free to Be conference this coming September.
Oh, excellent.
And in Chicago at the Unschoolers platform in February.
That takes nerve.
Don't know how that happened because I thought it was going to be in the spring, and I'm pretty sure February doesn't count as spring in Chicago. But anyway, I'll be finding some way to brave the snow. And
that's terrific.
Hopefully
okay.
There. And I think that's it for right now. I don't have any other plans. But,
Well, I'll make sure that I include links to all that stuff in the show notes. So if anyone is looking for that, they'll be able to find it. And thanks very much again for talking with me today, Pam.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for listening today. I hope you found it helpful. You might also like the backlist episodes at livingjoyfully.ca/podcast. You can also get your free Exploring Unschooling ebook at livingjoyfully.ca/exploring unschooling. If you'd like to connect, you can also find me on Facebook at Living Joyfully. Until next time, have fun living and learning with your family.